What if I told you there are easy ways to lower your Medicare prescription drug costs? Let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome back to Medicare Happy Hour, the most fun you'll have on the internet while talking about Medicare. Today, I am sipping on a strawberry lemonade because it is finally starting to feel like springtime outside, and sometimes it's nice to not always have the booze. So cheers, let's get started. Before we dive in, let's briefly go over what the phases of a Part D drug plan are again. So we do have several videos about this. You can go ahead and click here and check some of those out as well. So the deductible phase is when you're responsible for all of the costs of your drugs until you exhaust your annual deductible. So in 2025, that deductible is $590. So, I'll be frank, some plans waive parts of the deductible, some plans cover generics in the deductible, etc. But this is the general structure that the government sets forward for Part D drug plans. So they all have to be at least this good. So what I'm going over today is generally the basics. So next you go into the initial coverage phase. And in the initial coverage phase, you pay up to 25% of the cost of your drugs as the maximum copay. So that's until you hit $2,000 that you've spent out of pocket. So the thing that's important to keep in mind here are some generics are covered at zero. So you're obviously not going to pay 25% of those. You're going to pay zero for those. Some drugs, you might pay more or less, but 25 is sort of your max. It's always important to check out the drugs that you take for each plan to see how they're covered on that plan's formulary or list of drugs. Now, once you've spent $2,000 out of pocket, you would then enter the catastrophic phase. And starting in 2025, there is no cost sharing for the rest of the year for this. So you're not going to spend any more on the cost of your drugs. We have another video here I did just mention, but I want to bring up again that I would encourage you to watch because the Part D drug costs for 2025 did change a lot. And it's going to be a lot more affordable for a lot of people. But I would really recommend you take a look at that video as well, because I think it'll help to kind of wrap your head around a lot of this. So, a few things I do want to cover before I move into ways to get discounts on this is why are drug costs high? Inflation is obviously up. There's expensive brand name and specialty drugs. I'm sure that you're aware that when a new drug is released, they have a certain number of time that they're going to be, a brand drug before other companies can start to make it in generics and whatnot. So, we do see a lot of clients that take a lot of expensive brand name or specialty drugs, and that can really drive your costs up. All right, so now that we've learned about the structure of the plan, let's go ahead and talk about what some of those discounts look like and essentially how some people are looking to cut down that $2,000 that they're going to spend to, far less than that. So one option that we've seen a lot of clients consider and take advantage of over the years is GoodRx. And you likely are aware of this, the yellow company. They essentially, GoodRx compares drug costs at pharmacies, and it provides coupons and discount cards for you. So there are some pros and cons to using a service like GoodRx or, using the discount card essentially. A lot of people have saved a lot of money on these. That's obviously a huge pro. They're easy to use. They're widely accepted. I've even been at the pharmacy before when the pharmacist has recommended to someone like, oh, I think I have a coupon or I have a GoodRx card that you could use that would reduce your cost for this. Now, there are some cons too. First and foremost, this isn't insurance. A lot of people think since it discounts things that, oh, this is my insurance. This is not. This is just a discount program. And it might not always give you the lowest price. Your plan might be cheaper, or another alternative that I'm going to talk about in a little bit might be cheaper. So it's worth kind of doing your research. If you take a lot of expensive drugs, it's absolutely worth checking into GoodRx. But the other thing that I do want to mention here is I'm sure you've heard me say many times, the total cost of your drugs. So it's not necessarily what you've paid, but it's the total cost of your drugs. And if the pharmacist is reducing the total cost of your drug by using the GoodRx discount, that is something that might impact you. Again, we're looking at so much less drug costs this year with the $2,000 maximum out of pocket. So this is a moot point for a lot of people, but drugs are still expensive for a lot of folks, and we wanted to make sure we covered this. All right, there are some other discount programs. Kroger has a pharmacy discount program, Single Care, Needy Meds, etc. A lot of times I know this sounds silly, but I just like to listen to what the pharmacist is talking to people about, because sometimes they can find physician coupons or there are alternatives there. So it's always worth having a conversation with your pharmacist as well. Another alternative to discuss is Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drug Company. And many of you are familiar with Mark Cuban. You know, he owns the Dallas Mavericks, at least part of it. He's on Shark Tank, etc. So essentially, this is an online pharmacy that sells drugs at a transparent, reduced, lower price. And their goal is really just to reduce prescription drug costs for people. So, you know, like I just said, transparent, low prices. And it works by essentially what they do is they buy drugs direct from manufacturers. They add a 15% markup and then a $5 pharmacist fee, and they charge you for shipping. And so they're primarily online, and it is a cash pay system. So it's not insurance, it's just purchasing your drugs this way. So, you know, when it comes to pros and cons, the pro is the price transparency. A lot of times I go to the pharmacy to pick something up if one of my kids is sick or something, and I never know whether it's going to be $30, $90, or $3. So they really want to promote the price transparency. It could potentially lower costs for a lot of folks. There's online ordering. A lot of people are comfortable with that and would prefer that. In addition, the cons, though, not all medications are available, and it's not compatible. Insurance does not apply here. And, you know, you do have to wait for shipping times. If you need a prescription right away, you're not just popping down to the pharmacy down the street. You are ordering it online. So there is a shipping element to that as well. One other route that I do think is important to note is generic drugs. As you all know, I was talking earlier about some of these are even zero premium. They are typically less expensive. They're identical to the brand name drugs. They're less expensive, and the doctors can always prescribe generic drugs. Generics are not going to be an option for every prescription, but you know, it is worth checking that option out to continue to save money on your prescriptions. Now, a couple of other routes that I would recommend that you consider too are mail order pharmacy. So this is something that's available on all of the Medicare Part D prescription drug plans. And, you know, essentially what they'll do is they will mail you 3 months supply of your prescriptions directly to your house. So it's convenient. They deliver directly to your home. It's helpful to those in rural areas, have mobility issues. You know, my parents spend their winters in Florida, so they go ahead and get their prescriptions before they leave or change their address or have someone mail them down there to them. But that is something that, you know, you have to be aware of. Second is the cost savings. The pharmacies do generally reduce the cost. There's co-insurance, there's a 90-day supply versus 30, so it does lower those co-payments typically for what we see. And then the maintenance medication. Really the goal here with the insurance companies and those overseeing the mail order drugs is to make sure you have all of your prescriptions when you need it. So they're trying to provide you with what you need so that all of a sudden you don't go to take a prescription and realize, oh, I'm all out, I got to go to the pharmacy. They're going to get that prescription to you in advance so that you have all of the pills or medication that you need. In addition to this, there's one other thing I do want to mention, and it's Medicare Extra Help. And essentially what this is a low-income subsidy. It's referred to as LIS, and it's a federal program, and it helps those with limited income and resources. And frankly, we can help you with this. If you're curious, if your income would put you in a category where you would be eligible for extra help, give us a call. We're more than happy to talk through this with you. And, you know, I've seen this help a lot of people save a lot of money. So one thing I would really recommend as we continue to move forward is don't forget to review your Medicare plan, especially the Part D drug plans, every single year during the Medicare annual enrollment period. And as you may know from one of our other videos, that runs October 15th through December 7th. And as I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of changes in prescription drugs for 2025. Frankly, we're not going to see the volume of changes for 26, but we really don't know what's incoming for 2026. So it's incredibly important to continue to check your prescriptions, make sure they're covered by your plan, and they're covered in the way that gives you the most bang for your buck. So at the end of the day, if you have questions, need help, or really want to check out some of this information, give us a call.